97.7 FM. I'm your host this afternoon. My name is Zaffar Haq, and welcome to the show. This show is about going back down memory lane. We're going to look back at Leicester's history, going back at sort of people when they first came to the UK and the Muslim heritage and all those links that make Leicester and the UK the country that it is today. And I've got really excited about two fantastic guests today. We've got Ismail Dale and Tariq Hussain, who are both eminent people in their own field in historic history, in particular of the UK and in some parts in Leicester. So please, can I introduce my first guest, which is Ismail Dale.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Morning. Welcome to the show, Ismail. First of all, can you just enlighten us? What do you actually do, Ismail, and how are you involved? I know you live locally in Leicester as well, don't you?
That's right. Yeah, sure. I work for Historic England, and we're the organisation that conserves England's built heritage. So you might have heard of Grade 1 or Grade 2 listed buildings, and they could be anything from grand castles to unusual bits of architecture. And what we try to do is to conserve these buildings that really tell a story. They tell a story of, or they show a particularly really good example of some particular architectural or historical age, and they're conserved so that that story can continue in the future, and for future generations can enjoy them and go along to these places and see how people used to live in the past. So we conserve things very much like from all the way from Stonehenge. If you've ever been to Stonehenge, that's obviously a Grade 1 listed building, structure, castles. Then there's also manor houses, Georgian houses, pieces of Victorian architecture, examples of 60s brutalist buildings, war memorials, all those kind of things, even down to mosques, which we'll speak about later on.
Thank you very much, Ian. Ismail, sorry. I keep thinking of Ian Dale, the
yeah, not quite as famous.
Yeah. Presenter. Sorry, Ismail. Right. So the thing that really that we've obviously now coming into the area where mosques are now being treated as symbolic architecture in the UK, which is really quite dramatic when you think about it in comparison to most other countries, because most of the countries, they just see it as a normal sort of building that they might certainly in the subcontinent, and you're actually actively involved in trying to get them listed as historical buildings, which must be really fascinating. Ismail.
It is. Look, I'll be a little bit more clear about my role. Although that's what Historic England do, what I do is I engage schools in those buildings. So I've got the Heritage Schools programme. What we do is we engage schools with the story of the place where they live. So what I do is to work with schools in Leicester and Leicestershire and the East Midlands and try to find out about the story of the places where they live. So we will use these buildings kind of as teaching resources in a way, so that children can go along there and study and see how people used to live in the past. So very often we're using religious buildings. So for example, you'll always go and see a church. If you're in a village, you would always go to see the church because it's usually the oldest building in the village. And you can find a lot about that. You can go into the graveyards and you can see the names of, people who lived in Georgian and Victorian times, see what their names are and see, examples, for example, of children 2 and 3 that were buried with their parents. And you can kind of get an idea of what life was like in the past. But as well as that, there are synagogues in all over the country, and mosques that also tell that story. And of course, the book that we will talk about later on looks very much more at some of the more modern mosques, but there's been mosques in in Britain since the late 1800s. So this is a story that's gone on for some time, and they're all valued by British by English heritage, and that's why they've got this listed status.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ismail. I really appreciate that. If you want to join in on the program, we'd love to hear from you this afternoon. You can call us on 0116 248 22086, or you can send us a text message or WhatsApp on 07450 925 084. I'm going to introduce our second guest, and it's Tariq Hussain, who's a world travel writer across the world and award-winning journalist who has specialized and worked extensively on Muslim heritage around the world. It's a great honor to have you on the show, Brother Tariq. Please introduce yourself and just give us a background about what you do.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on here. Yes, so you've kind of covered most of it. Essentially, I'm a travel writer and author who focuses on Islamic heritage across the globe. But I'm also what some have described as a bit of a heritage activist, in that I do quite a bit of work on Muslim heritage in the UK. You know, coming from England and Britain, it's obviously it's my heritage, and essentially I've also engaged in heritage projects in this country, and that's where myself and Ismail's paths have crossed. In that one of the projects that I've worked on is to do with the book that Ismail mentioned, and Historic England were part of the kind of process in that. The book mentions lots and lots of mosques up and down the country. I'll just show the listeners what it looks like. Some of them will be aware. So it
seems quite a heavy book as well. There's quite a lot of detail in there by the looks of things.
Indeed, it's a very big book, and it's done. It was written by Shahid Salim, who is an eminent kind of Muslim architect who has worked on several fascinating mosques himself. And the reason the book is part of the discussion, not only the fact that it's covered the British mosque in a way that has never been done before. In other words, recognizing the mosque as not just a social institute, but also of architectural and historic and heritage importance. But the book was launched almost it was actually launched to coincide with the fact that the Shah Jahan Mosque in Woking, built in 1889, was listed as a Grade 1 historic monument, which is the first time ever that a mosque in this country has been listed on a par with the likes of Stonehenge, with the likes of, I think, Kensington Palace. And so it really puts the mosque right up there. And it's around that mosque that I've done most of my heritage work in this country.
Excellent. Thank you, Brother Tariq. I really, I know you wrote for the Lonely Planet and quite a few different articles in different newspapers and media channels as well. It does mean that Islamic culture, Islamic architecture, and these kind of projects are becoming more and more mainstream, and people want to know about them, and people have the ability to start looking at them and preserving them. How did the two of you meet, first of all, and how did you start some of these projects going, and the background behind them?
Well, we actually met in Leicester, so we both attend something.
Leicester is the hub of everywhere.
Clearly.
Absolutely.
So in Leicester, in Markfield, at the Islamic Foundation, there is a retreat that has been consistently going on for quite some time now. I'm sure Ismail will tell you a bit more of the background because he's been attending a lot longer. And the retreat is essentially, a 3-day spiritual retreat that takes place during Ramadan. And it was primarily aimed, as far as I'm aware, feel free to chip in, Ismail, originally aimed at convert Muslims from up and down the UK. And my wife's a convert. Ismail's also a convert. And essentially our paths crossed there. But Ismail, if you want to tell everyone a bit more about the project, bro, because I know.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's part of the New Muslim Project, run by Batula, and she's created this very, very friendly and safe place for converts to come together and their families, because we're kind of in a more unusual situation, if you like, we very often come from mixed race relationships, and we've come into Islam as British people, and it's helped us be able to kind of forge a British Islam, if you like, and to really see how we kind of fit in to the religion. And obviously we bring in different experiences and different cultures into it, and it's a place where we can all meet together every year. Our kids can get together, they can all play around and have a great time and meet lots of other children who are in the same kind of situation as they are, because it's quite unusual to come from a family where one of your parents is a new Muslim, and so it kind of makes it normal. It normalizes it for them. It gives us a space where we can meet different people from different backgrounds and meet very, very interesting people like Tariq. So it's been a great opportunity, really, and it's something that I know many new Muslims or old Muslims like me we look forward to every year. And unfortunately, this year with the COVID-19 situation, it's the first year for, I think, nearly 20 years that it hasn't gone ahead. But there you go.
And the fact that obviously the project Zaffar is focused on new Muslims, as in converts, and therefore people who probably identify first and foremost with the tag of being British, I think leads nicely into where myself and Ismail and his institute's paths have crossed, and that is the fact that we Ismail turned up to the launch of essentially what are the very first Muslim heritage trails in Britain. So there's an example of one of the maps. It's called Britain's Muslim Heritage Trails, and this is number 1. I've got number 2 over here to the right, but it's open so I can read it. But essentially, these trails were developed down in Woking around the Shah Jahan Mosque, and we had huge support from Historic England and huge support from English Heritage, as well as the Woking Council, the Heritage Lottery Fund, and various other institutes. And I think the reason why I feel this is something that resonates with a lot of people that attend the Ramadan retreat, but just British Muslims generally, is the fact that this is really one of the first projects that has tried to make our indigenous, for want of a better phrase, Muslim heritage much more accessible. And it goes back all the way to that, late 19th century Muslim community that developed in the South and flourished.
Yeah, I mean, it's an inspiration, because if you think about it, when people came to Leicester or Birmingham or London, there was no mosque anywhere in the country. And to have something there started in the late 1898, as early as that, it's obviously inspiration to other people to say, actually, if there's a mosque in Woking, we can have one in Leicester, we can have one everywhere else. And it's great to hear the background story, actually, that Leicester is the melting pot of the world, of the country, for us to inspire people like you to come to Leicester and to get involved and think of these great ideas to develop, because actually it needs developing, because there is a history to be told. And I think it's, what is the background between regarding the start of the Shah Jahan Mosque, actually? Because that was very, very early on. You must have done some work between the two of you on that bit as well.
Well, it's quite interesting, because obviously when you start to think about when Muslims came to this country, most people think it came with people from the Indian subcontinent, during the 60s and 70s. But when we look back into history, that's really they're not the first mosques that were in Britain. As I said, our relations with Muslim people and Islamic lands goes all the way back to Anglo-Saxon times. We've got King Offa, who was Anglo-Saxon king. He actually had coins made, which were imitations of the gold dinar of Caliph al-Mansur. We're not sure exactly why he had these done, whether he was copying something, but the most interesting thing about it is they have the Shahada written out in Arabic on these coins for this Anglo-Saxon king. And funnily enough, we think that the king, whoever made the coin, whoever melted the coin, whoever designed it, didn't understand the Arabic script, because Offa's name in Arabic, Offa Rex, which Rex means king, obviously, is actually in Arabic script, but it's upside down. And so it was obvious that even from these times there was trade going on between the Muslim lands and Britain. And then, of course, once we get to the Victorian times, or probably just a little bit before, then Britain was expanding an empire and going to India and places like that, coming into contact with Muslims and Hindus, obviously, with people from all different faiths. And these were very much influenced British culture, and also influenced British architecture, because you can see a lot of British architects during that time taking inspiration from Islamic architecture, and you can see it in Brighton Pavilion, you can see it in various places, you can even see it in Art Deco buildings in the Byzantine kind of style. And you can see these minarets and things like that. And very often they were a bit pastiche. They were a little bit. They took ideas from Islamic architecture and reinterpreted them, and went a little bit over the top sometimes. But you can very much see these kind of architectural designs, especially in this. I suppose the best example is the Shah Jahan Mosque in Woking. It's a beautiful building. As I say, it's got grade 1, which is the highest level of protection that it can be given. And very interestingly the architect was obviously British.
It's fantastic, really interesting, Ismail. I never knew some of those things, really, to be honest, and it's great to hear those. If any of the listeners want to text us or message us, please, we'd love to hear from you this afternoon. You can call us on 0116 248 22086, and if you've got any questions or you want to send us a message, you can WhatsApp us or send us a message on 07450 925 084. You're listening to Radio Ramadan on 87.7 FM, and I've got two special guests, Ismail Dale and Tariq Hussain, who are talking about the history of the first mosques in the UK, and also about how Islam has influenced many buildings and even kings in the past. Really, it's really interesting to hear some of these stories, because some of them are really new to me, and I'm sure they're new to a lot of listeners out there. We're going to show, I think what we'll do in the second part of it, if we can get a picture of the Shah Jahan Mosque up as well, that would be good, to show that this was the first mosque. That would be great if we can organise that. Very quickly, Tariq, if I could, before we go back to the break, has that been your most important project that you've done, or your most excited project that you've been involved in?
Oh, it's certainly been the most important project in the UK, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I've done work across the globe, but they tend to be more from a journalistic perspective and a writing perspective. And I've also created trails for tourists in other parts of the world. But certainly, I think for me, the fact that I'm British, my family is British. This is without a shadow of a doubt the most important project, because it's the first tourist project. That makes accessible this heritage for anybody and everybody.
Yeah, it's great. And actually, it's really important, I think, that we go back and look at what the history of Muslims are in the UK. There's so much to learn, and to actually say to people, actually, this mosque has been here for 100 years. The Brighton Pavilion played a pivotal part in the First World War. It was where a lot of the troops were housed from the Commonwealth as a hospital. And all these places have links to the future as well. And I've noticed there seems to be a trend of more sort of mainstream history coming into the UK about Islam and about generally. And it's down to people like both Ismail and yourself, Tariq. But we'll discuss a bit more of this after the break. But if anybody wants to call us, please give us a call on 0116 248 22086, or send us a text message on 07450 925 084. This is Memory Lane on BBC Radio, on Radio Ramadan at 87.7 FM. And please join us after the break.
in absolutely fantastic shape. And
would you recommend people go and have a look? Because
I
I'd love
would,
to go and have a
yes,
look.
yeah, it's definitely worth going to have a look. Yeah, yeah. Go along. Our chairman, actually, Sir Laurie Magnus, was there, and other representatives from Historic England were there as well. And funnily enough, Laurie Magnus was related. I can't remember exactly whether it's his great uncle or something.
Great uncle, I think, Ismail.
Yeah, his great uncle was related to Marmaduke Pickthall, which a lot of people will recognize his name because he translated the Quran, of course. Very beautiful translation, quite Shakespearean, Victorian kind of phraseology. And yeah, so he's related to him. So he had a direct, a direct connection with the mosque. And Marmaduke Pickthall is actually buried, isn't he, Tariq, in the Muslim cemetery, which is very, very nearby. And that's another one of the trails that we went on.
I'm just trying to relay this to the listeners who are listening on radio. If you go onto the sort of your internet, Google websites, you can look up the Shah Jahan Mosque in Woking, and you'll see the pictures. And Tariq at the moment is showing up the actual trail of the route where people, the Muslim trail, Heritage Trail in Woking, that people can actually follow, and it looks fantastic. Really,
it's worth going along because there's more than one trail. Let's say there's one at the Shah Jahan Mosque, but a few miles away is the Muslim cemetery, which has got the great and the good from the Victorian Muslims like Marmaduke Pickthall, but Tariq can tell you more.
So yeah, just to jump in, because as Ismail says, there are two trails. So essentially, the trails were all created. I must make sure that I mention this, by an organisation called EverydayMuslim.org. And Everyday
Muslim. Show the picture again. Sorry, just show the picture of the trail again.
Oh yeah. So the trail. This is the cemetery trail. Which shows a walking trail that attendees can do to actually find the graves of some of the most prominent Muslims buried
if you Google that, will it come up and people can look at it on
Britain's Muslim Heritage Trails? But actually, if you go onto everydaymuslim.org, because that's the organisation who do lots and lots of heritage projects up and down the country, and the one that I worked on for them was the creation, led to the creation of these two trails. So one trail, just to quickly give everybody a synopsis of what they're looking at, and this is why I urge everybody to go down there, because this is your heritage. Okay, this place became known as the Mecca of Europe by Europeans. That's how important the place was. And some say it was also where the name Pakistan was created, but that's another story. So what the first trail does is, which is this one here, okay, it covers 3 spots, 3 places of significance in the Surrey area. Because of the mosque, the area became...
Yeah, sorry. We have the link on Facebook. If people can't get to this, the link is on Facebook. You'll be able to see it on there as well.
Sure. The area became very, very important because although Quilliam's mosque was the first to arrive to be created in the country, it sadly collapsed when Quilliam left the area himself. So this mosque became the real hub, and this is why there's so much heritage there. And because the mosque was there, what happened is, attached prior to building the mosque, Leitner very, very sensibly also acquired a plot of land in the local cemetery. This land now has a blue plaque on it, which Everyday Muslim and myself helped to get into place because it became the first Muslim cemetery in the country. And in fact, it is actually the first Muslim space in Britain ever. And so that's on the trail. And then you also have nearby the Woking Muslim Military Cemetery. So 3 amazing sites of significance, all within the same area, that are on the first trail. And for the second trail, we actually take people to the cemetery, and then we ask them to walk around and go and visit the final resting place of Marmaduke Pickthall. Quilliam's in there, but we don't know his exact location because it's a mystery. There are Ottoman one of the last Ottoman princesses is there. We've got Dame Zaha Hadid, the British architect, there. We've also got other kings and queens that people don't know anything about until they get there.
All in this same cemetery.
Exactly, in the same cemetery. Oh. And our big coup, which we unveiled on the day of the launch, as Ismail will tell you, is that we discovered buried in the cemetery was a princess who had been completely forgotten, who claimed, firstly, she was half British, who claimed direct descendancy from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. And her name was Princess Musbah Haidar. And this was the one that really attracted the attention of the likes of the Times newspaper, who ended up doing a big piece on it, and Arab News and others. So it's a real fascinating space with so much history, and it shows the amazing kind of network and connections that Britain had across the Muslim world, from the Nawabs in India through to the Ottomans, and of course our own indigenous British Muslim converts. And the trail is something you can pick up the maps free at the mosque, at the cemetery office, and then follow them yourselves. And Ismail did a small guided tour while we was there.
That's right.
Fantastic.
And that doesn't even talk about the military cemetery, where you've got several graves of Muslim soldiers from India who obviously died during the First World War. Indeed. I mean, that is probably, I hope during the centenary, that was really the contribution of Britain's empire during the First World War, and the Second World War really was absolutely pivotal to Britain and the Allies winning both of those wars, because there is no way that Britain could have survived if it didn't have the resources and the men from the British Empire. And of course, there were many, many, many people from the Indian subcontinent and other areas that fought in both of those wars. And their contribution, it has been highlighted, but it's something that's very, very much that's very important, that Muslims in this country realise that they've got a long Muslim heritage here, both from the subcontinent and with indigenous, converts. And it's something that's very, very important to our history.
Fantastic. Just because I can see a message, Zaffar, on the chat. I'm going to talk while I hold this up, because otherwise people can't see it. So essentially, these are the trail maps. You'll see that one is called the Woking Trail, which is number 1, and the other one's called the Muslim Cemetery Walk, number 2. And these are the trails you can actually pick up in person at the mosque or over at the cemetery, or you can download them as PDFs from everydaymuslim.org and go on the trails yourself. It's great fun with the kids. It's great fun with the family. So please do them.
Some of these are on our website, on the Facebook page, so you'll be able to follow them on there. Just want to ask a couple of quick questions. We've not got much time left, unfortunately. It's really fascinating to hear some of this detail. Really, I'm new to me, and I'm new to a lot of people out there, I'm sure. You spoke about the Muslim Heritage Trail. How was it perceived at this launch? How much interest has this revived across the country and across the world? And Tariq, about your work that you've done across the world, is this becoming more popular? Is it just generally people getting more and more interested?
I think so to answer your first question, how was it received? It was actually received really, really well, because we were kind of gazumped by Boris Johnson on the day, because I can't remember what it was, but there was a big news story on the day. Maybe he was announced as Prime Minister. I don't know, something like that, something insignificant that we didn't care too much about. Yeah. But and then we had the horrific hot weather as well. But yet, despite that, we had the BBC. We had BBC Radio there. We had the Times turn up. We had Arab News. So we had big media. Then we had eminent guests. The likes of Ismail were there. We also had, Sir Laurie obviously made the effort to come and cut the ribbon for the 2 trails. We had a lot of interest. But I'm going to be very, very blunt here. What made me sad was the lack of interest from our own community, in that we invited lots and lots of institutes who I won't name, and it was really sad to see that many of them didn't really make the effort that we had hoped for. Maybe they were otherwise distracted or whatever. But and that really leads into your second question: is there interest across the globe? I think when I've traveled across the globe and I've worked on Muslim heritage from places that you would least expect it, such as Lithuania through to Thailand, and of course, most recently I worked on the Saudi Arabia Lonely Planet Guide, where the Muslim heritage is everywhere. We have a real problem with our community in that in the past, not in this country necessarily, in the past, we have not valued our heritage in the way that maybe we should. And as a result, we have not necessarily preserved it. Arguably, we might not have always had the resources, but we also didn't bother to explore and investigate it. So, you know, I turn up in some places and I'm pulling back, you know, shrubs and weeds to find graves of eminent scholars and individuals from the past, or find a ruined mosque and realize it was built by a royal Ottoman sultan, and wondering what on earth is a royal mosque doing in this.
Yeah. So
that's really sad.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. It's really been fascinating to listen to the insight, both from Tariq and Ismail. Really appreciate you coming on the show. It's really opened my eyes, and hope it's opened a lot of eyes to a lot of listeners listening into the Woking, the Muslim Heritage Trail. Fascinating, you know, to hear some of those stories of the background, going back as far as the Victorian area and even before. You know, this is really inspiring and really great work that you're doing. Thank you very much for all the hard work that you do. You're listening to Radio Ramadan on 87.7 FM, and I hope everybody will join us next week again, where we've got some more fascinating stories. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks for having us on. Salam.
Thank you, Zaffar.
Thank you. Stay, guys. That's it. Thank you.